I live alone in a building that pretends not to notice the people inside it, which is exactly how I like it. The walls are thin enough to confirm that others exist, but thick enough to avoid knowing anything about them, and the hallway smells faintly of cleaning product and old mail, which feels honest. It is early evening, and I am standing in my kitchen deciding whether hunger deserves effort today when the knock comes. It is soft, almost unsure of itself, like the person knocking would completely understand if I did not answer. I open the door. He is standing there with an apologetic smile and empty hands, which is something I will later realize is important. He introduces himself as my neighbor from 3C, and before I can say my own name, he apologizes for bothering me and asks if I might have some salt. I am still a person who believes this is a normal interaction. I say yes without thinking, because salt is not a boundary, and because refusing salt would require explaining myself, which feels like too much work for a Tuesday. I pour some into a small bowl and hand it to him, and he thanks me so thoroughly that it briefly feels like I have done something heroic. When I close the door, I do not think about him again. Days pass. Life continues in small, repetitive ways that feel stable enough to trust. I go to work, I come home, I reheat leftovers and watch the same shows without finishing them, and at no point do I suspect that anything is changing. When I reach for the salt a few days later and do not find it, I blame myself immediately, because blaming myself is familiar and comfortable. I assume I used it all, even though that does not align with reality, and I add salt to my mental grocery list and move on. The next knock comes while I am eating dinner. Same knock, same careful rhythm. It is him again, standing in the same spot, wearing the same apologetic expression, and asking if I might have some sugar because he has run out while baking. There is a pause, barely noticeable, but something inside me registers repetition. My brain flags it and then immediately dismisses it, because suspicion feels dramatic. I give him sugar, he promises to bring it back. I believe him, not because I have evidence, but because believing him is easier than imagining a different outcome. The borrowing continues in a way that feels almost accidental, as if neither of us is fully aware that it is happening. Scissors, tape, a pen, a lighter. Each request arrives wrapped in politeness, each item small enough to feel unimportant, each interaction brief enough to avoid reflection. I start to notice changes before I admit them. My apartment feels quieter, not peaceful quiet, but emptied quiet, like a room after people leave a party. Sounds travel farther than they should. My footsteps feel louder. I wash the same fork more often than feels reasonable. Friends come over and comment on how clean my place looks. They say it feels intentional. I laugh because explaining the truth would require saying out loud that my life is slowly being relocated next door. Then one evening he asks to borrow a chair. A chair changes something. Chairs are not consumable. Chairs imply duration. Chairs imply that something is happening somewhere else that requires structure and support. I look at him, then at the chair, then at the hallway between our apartments, and for the first time I picture my belongings actively participating in someone else's life. I let him take it. After that, the building itself starts to feel different. I notice sounds from other apartments more clearly, laughter, footsteps, music bleeding through walls, and I realize that while everyone else seems to be accumulating life, I am slowly subtracting mine. At the same time, my own routine begins to shrink. Cooking feels less appealing without the right tools. Inviting people over feels awkward when I am unsure how many places I can seat them. I start spending more time outside, cafes, libraries, parks, places where nothing belongs to me and therefore nothing can be borrowed. One night, while sitting on a bench near my building, I see him through his window. My chair is visible, so is my mug. For a moment, I feel something unexpected. Not anger, not jealousy, but a strange tenderness, like watching a version of my life play out in the wrong apartment. The knock that changes everything comes late, late enough that it carries weight. When I open the door, he looks nervous in a way I have not seen before, and he tells me that this might sound strange, but his apartment feels loud and crowded tonight, and he was wondering if I might have some silence to spare. I understand then that this is no longer about objects. This is about space. This is about presence. This is about someone who has been quietly building himself out of borrowed pieces and has reached the limit of what that can provide. I do not answer immediately. I step back and look at my apartment, at the empty spaces, at the absence that has been disguised as simplicity, and for the first time I feel something solid settle in my chest. I tell him no. Not sharply, not unkindly, but clearly, like stating a fact that has been true for a while. He nods, relieved and disappointed at the same time, and apologizes again, though this time it feels different, heavier, more real. The next morning, my belongings begin to return. Not dumped, not rushed, but placed carefully, one by one, as if each item remembers where it belongs. As my apartment fills back in, so do I. I cook again. I invite friends over. I sit in my chair and drink from my mug and feel the quiet return in a way that feels earned rather than empty. He still lives next door. We nod when we pass each other. Sometimes I think about how easy it is to give pieces of yourself away without noticing, how politeness can become permission, how silence can feel generous until you realize you have none left. And sometimes, late at night, when the building settles and the hallway goes still, I am grateful that everything I own has finally come home. Like and subscribe for more stories.